Good evening. Good evening. Buy Black for Life. Buy Black for Life. Good evening. It is Wednesday. And I will say this again because I said it earlier. Most people call it Hump Day. We here at Buy Black for Life call it Wellness Wednesday. And today is the PM edition. As earlier today, we had Carl Bartlett Jr. Join us for Wellness Wednesday. And if you haven't seen that, please do. He is a saxophonist who uses his music to heal his community. So come right in. We have an amazing, amazing group. And what we're going to be discussing this evening is mental health in the workplace. And we have some familiar panelists who are veterans of this group. As a matter of fact, Dr. Jackie was just here 24 hours ago. So please come right in, and I'm going to jump right in and read Merla Parrish's bio. So Merla is a senior social worker and education coordinator with Mount Sinai Employee Assistance Program, develops, operates, and manages the Employee Assistance, an MSW internship program, composes and conducts human resources seminars, i.e., workplace and sexual harassment and cultural competency. She Merla supports administrative and managerial clients in the evaluation of employee performance, utilizes cognitive, behavioral, and psychodynamic therapeutic modalities for individuals, couples, and families in crisis in a competitive, fast paced, multicultural, multi ethnic structured hierarchy spanning 8 campuses throughout New York City and Nassau County. Merla provides direct clinical services to working adult clients in mental health, substance abuse, work related situations, collaborative with interdisciplinary professionals in the creation and execution of treatment plans. Merla assists MSW MPH students in integrating instruction with the practicum of an EAP. Buy Black for Life, Merla Parrish. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us. And I will ask Zulay and Dr. Jackie, starting with Zulay Martinez, to please just give our viewers just a recap of who you are and the amazingness that you also bring to this conversation.
My name is Zulay Martinez. I am an assistant principal at a public high school in the Bronx. I've been with the Department of Education for 16 years, 12 of those in the classroom, 4 of those as an administrator. And, the first generation child of immigrants from the Dominican Republic. New Yorker for life. And I have dedicated my life to the children of New York City, specifically the Bronx, which is the poorest county in the city of New York, where my presence and my background and my life experience would do the best good for my kids. So.
Thank you. And I do want to talk about an excuse. I even have the door closed and I can hear the dog, which means something's going on in this house and I have no control over it, so I won't try to figure it out. and Zulay, I also would like to talk about the Bronx because, there are some things that are going on in our communities that I think it is imperative that we address it. So I will, and Dr. Jackie and I were talking about that earlier. So Dr. Jackie, please tell us, recap who you are, what you do.
Sure. Well, thank you once again for inviting me back home. This is like home away from home. I've been in the social services field for over 30 years in all different types of professions, managing programs, finance, training, particularly working with individuals who have been affected or infected by HIV/AIDS. And I have also am the CEO of Wealth Enrichment Fiscal Literacy Initiative, teaching individuals how to manage their finances and really focusing on the emotions and beliefs that they may have based on their experiences with managing their finances. I'm also the senior pastor of Casa de la Paz Ministries, and no, it's not vanity. We did not name the church under our name. It just so happens to translate House of Peace. And so there I teach, I preach the word. We have a couple of safe spaces. One is the Hour of the Word, where is a co-created space with individuals who have supported the ministry with creating a healing space where trauma can be discussed and the beginning of healing, the beginning process can start. I also facilitate the spiritual clinic, which is alignment with God, pretty much reminding people who they are in the eyes of God. Oftentimes we're so busy with the hustle and bustle that we forget who God calls us to be. And then I also facilitate a entrepreneurship clinic, teaching people how to do business God's way, which also supports with the healing process. I firmly believe that as an entrepreneur, I cannot pour in if I'm not willing to take the steps to heal myself, because then what I'm pouring in is trauma, hurt, pain. And so to be able to support individuals to do that, that's basically what I do.
Thank you. Thank you. And that what you're basically saying is healed people heal people. So that's been something I've been saying for years. Because we are healed, we use our healing to help heal others. So thank you, Dr. Jackie. And I'm going to open it up to some questions, because I'm realizing with the country starting to open up, employers starting to call their employees back into the offices. I notice myself, because I normally drive my wife into work in the city, that there's much more traffic now than there was before going into the city. So we're starting to get back into the city and back into work. And I'm concerned because we all, during the past year, and maybe even many of us before the pandemic, experienced some trauma, some things, right? So as a manager, and Marla, I'll ask you first, what signs as a colleague or as a manager should I look for in someone who might be suffering from some mental health issues as we start to go back and be amongst one another?
I think that's a great question and topic. Unfortunately, I think that most managers, you don't have to look very hard usually. Some of the signs can be you're looking for change in performance, change in behavior at work. So if you've had an employee that's been great and then all of a sudden they're calling out a little bit more, or they're consistently arriving late, or just so you can kind of tell that they're not themselves, all these are signs, depending on your relationship with the employee, would be whether you would want to approach. Some employees are comfortable to tell their managers when they're going through something. Various companies, I work at Mount Sinai Health System in the Employee Assistance Program, and some of the anecdotal stories I'll share, they're not all at Mount Sinai. I've worked at different corporations in different capacities before. So is there an EAP available? Excuse me. And often some of the words to use are like stress is a more socially acceptable word as one moves into mental health.
Right.
The strategy, not the spectrum of mental health. So stress, anxiety, depression, and depending on what the employee shares or what you as a manager observes, if they're willing to talk to you, you can make these suggestions.
Right.
If their performance impacts in such a way that it's a disciplinary action or moving towards disciplinary action, like they're calling out, like it's too much calling out, or you notice a pattern of like calling out, extending a weekend, so like calling out on a Monday, sometimes that could indicate substance abuse or use of alcohol. So different things. It doesn't have to, but all of those things are kind of like what you're looking for. Changes in behavior and making note of them.
Right.
You know? And then I also encourage managers, you don't have to be a clinician, because sometimes managers push to be a clinician. They're empathetic and they're compassionate, but like, even if you're professionally a clinician, like even if you're a trained social worker, you're not the employee's clinician.
Right.
So just to have those boundaries of professionalism to protect you and to protect the employee and to keep things more fair and even. Yeah.
Got it. Now, Zalai, I know you're in the school system, so that focus for you is on students, but if and I know there is a system in place if you should notice something with a student. How about with a colleague, for example, and I know you're not always in the classroom, so there's not that closeness, but how about you? How would you handle something like that if it were a colleague that you're observing might be dealing with something?
Yeah, I think that this is one of those things where this is where training often, when you reach this administrative managerial position, is often lacking. Like, how do you handle this situation? It's one thing when, there are systems in place when someone has a death in the family, right? You know how much time you get to give off depending on the closeness of the relative, and, or some other disaster that might happen or emergency that might happen. But when the emergency or the disaster is something as, as I guess you could say murky, maybe, as mental health, there aren't many guidelines yet around that. But one of the things I will say about the New York City Department of Education in particular is that because of the way that it's set up, there are several systems in place, several ways for someone who is perhaps going through a crisis of some sort to be able to find a way to deal with it and handle it and not necessarily be worried that their position is in jeopardy.
Right.
So for example, in the city of New York, teachers, you accrue a personal / sick day a month. So let's say you're someone who doesn't take many sick days, doesn't get sick often. At the end of a 10-month period of you being a teacher, that's 10 days that you've accumulated, and that goes into a bank.
Okay.
And, as the years go by, if you need to take those days, they are there for you. Now,
so they roll over each year with you. You can accumulate them. Got it. Okay.
To the point that even there's like a stipulation in teacher contracts where, like, if by the time you retire, you have a certain number, because some people accrue so many days, you've got like school years worth of days accumulated, especially depending on how many years you end up in the profession. Yes. Some of those days you can actually buy back at the end, like as you're ready to retire, you can get some of that money back. But so that's one of the things that is there in terms of your ability to take days. Now, one of the things, unfortunately, the other end of that is, much like Merla said, it can be looked at negatively if you're taking too many days, right? If it looks like you're taking advantage of your days. Sometimes simply saying something like, well, I'm going through a mental health crisis, especially when it's not documented, it's unacceptable.
Mhm.
And that's one of the unfortunate parts of when you're dealing with mental health. And maybe it's something, especially when it's something that's new to you, when you yourself don't understand what it is that you're dealing with. You know that something is going on up here, right? And in here, but you don't know what it is. You don't have a name for it. You don't have a diagnosis for it. You still haven't sought help for it. The days are there, but sometimes it can feel hard to take. But that, as an administrator, that makes it a little easier when you're seeing something's going on with one of your teachers or one of your staff members, to be able to have those sort of one-on-one conversations. And sometimes, even if you yourself do not have a personal relationship, one of the things that I've been able to do as an administrator is, if I know that that person does have a personal relationship with someone else that I'm close to, then I could probably go to that person and say, listen, I checked in and said, how's everything going? Is everything okay? But would you check in as well? And I think that the system of education, of working together in our trenches, makes it so that close relationships like that can be formed. On the other hand, there are things that the Department of Education allows you, which a lot of jobs don't, things like sabbaticals, right? The ability to take that extended time off to pursue a passion, or maybe to just deal with, your personal issues or whatever is going on. And that's something that not many people, unfortunately, have the ability to take advantage of. The other thing is again, specific to New York City, because that's where I've worked. There are several health options, because I think that health insurance is a huge part of the conversation of how can you and how can people who work for you deal with any kind of crisis, medical or mental, physically medical, I should say, or mental. And the Department of Education there's 2 different medical plans that are free to their teachers and their employees that the city covers for us.
Right.
And then there are some that are paid for if you want like a couple more things. And one of the things that has happened as the years have gone on is that the mental health option and portion of our health insurance has expanded. Not to the point to make it easy, but at least to the point to make it more accessible and visible, and know that I know this is something that my insurance covers.
Yes.
Let me do some legwork and hopefully find something. And so just even me as an administrator, that's something that I try to make sure that I know about, so that should I need to share that kind of information with my teachers, my staff, it's readily available for me to be like, hey, take a look, call HR Connect, call these people, and, maybe see if this is a way that, whatever is going on with you, you might try to deal with. But it does become a sort of touchy subject that can be really difficult, because you don't always know where that border is. Like, where are you crossing the line between concerned, right, and someone feeling that you're just nosy or out to get them, or, right? Like,
yes.
And that becomes really difficult.
So it's based upon relationship. So.
Right. Especially when, again, there is no set policy for that.
Yes.
There's policy for death in the family. There's policy for cancer or sudden ailment. There's policy for all these things, but mental health issue is just something that has not reached our consciousness in this country enough to make it into the policy of our companies and corporations. Merla, I'm sorry. I actually wanted to ask you, you had mentioned if you're in a company or somewhere that has an EAP. What's EAP?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Please.
Andrew. So EAP is Employee Assistance Program. Some companies, if they have a union, it'll be a Members Assistance Program, a MAP. But yeah, so most operate where it's short-term confidential counseling to employees or staff members and their families. Usually it's free, and depending, each EAP has a policy, or each corporation has a policy of what short-term means. 1 session, 3 sessions, 8 sessions, 10 sessions. And then it would be a referral at that point using the employee's health insurance if it's necessary. So sometimes, sometimes 3 sessions is all that's needed. Sometimes there's a one and done. But yeah, and then employees can decide with the clinician whether they want longer term, so it's kind of like a mental health triage and then referral.
And if I can also add, it's not just the mental health piece. There's a financial piece. There's it's so many different things wrapped up in this employee assistance program. And I'll say I've used it at every job I've ever been at. I've reached out for different things. When I was going through a divorce, I reached out to my employee assistance program, and they had some recommendations for me. When I most recently used it, they gave me a list of mental health providers that I can go to. And when my mental health provider wasn't a part of that list, all he had to do was complete some paperwork for him to be accepted into the program, for me to continue with him under my employee assistance program. So if you're doing adoption, so many people, you go through the employee assistance program. It is something that a lot of employers have. And, Marla, I just want to say, I've worked with an employer that didn't have it. Like, literally, I'll never forget, I had a conversation with our EAP person, and I remember him saying, "Yeah, Jerome, this is my last day." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And months later, because I was going through depression and I needed to talk to someone. And it shocked me when I called and my employer said, "We no longer offer it." And I just thought that in order to make sure you would want this, because you want to make sure your employees are okay, however that may look. You want to make sure your employees are okay. So it really surprised me when my employer years ago took it away. And, it left me like, I worked 2 jobs, so it's a good thing I had another job that I can use the other job. But it really surprised me that more employers don't have an employee assistance program.
Right, and there are different kinds of employee assistance programs. We're at Mount Sinai Health System, we're what's called an embedded EAP. So we're there on campus. We work for Mount Sinai. Some EAPs are offer like an 800 number, so they're removed. Some EAPs are better with the kind of what I call concierge, like they're able to send you a list of day camps for your children.
Yes.
Or, so we do some of that, but they're different ways of supporting employees and supporting staff. Yeah.
Salai, did that answer your question?
It did. Are these things normally attached to like are they like literally attached to your company, where like this person works for a company, or are they attached to like health insurance options?
Both.
Yeah.
So we're embedded, so we're attached to the company. And the benefit to that, there are many, but one of them is we know the culture of the company, we know the players, we're right there.
I like that.
And we can respond. And, it's about relationships, like what Jerome said. So we can support managers, and, we do support managers in terms of they just have to give us a call, and we'll make the time to address kind of what they're going through, so that they have a confidential place to talk out some of these, behavioral issues that we were talking about, to see, what Zulai was saying. Is it, how should I go? And the difference between us and say labor relations are required to open up a case and investigate, right? So they're the people, if it's sexual harassment or workplace harassment or anything like that, they have to investigate. It is not confidential, right? So, there's different ways to go.
That was also going to be one, because I know that like one of the things, let's say if I were as an assistant principal, it's not quite my purview, although I can bring it to the attention of my principal. But I know that one of the things that a principal can do is you can refer one of your teachers or employees for like a psych eval. Let's say that whatever the behavior the person is exhibiting is just has reached that extent that you're like, I'm worried. I think something much bigger is going on here.
Yeah.
Is that like normally, like, let's say where you would go?
Yeah. So that is a good point. So there's two ways that managers would refer employees to us. One is just kind of like a suggestion, like we're all talking, I'm making up, you have a good doctor, good PCP, recommend it, July. So, you could just say if a colleague is saying, I'm going through something, a divorce, grief, fire, anything that happens in life, the EAP is available to you, and just let people know. The other way is if a manager is concerned about if it's gone beyond that a little bit, and in that case, we'd want the manager to contact us and let us know. So it'd say, July would say, I'm concerned about Jerome. I'm going to have him call you. We want Jerome to call us himself or the employee because we want some buy-in, right? We want to make sure that he wants to work with us. And but we need the supervisor, say July, to say, this is what I've observed.
Right.
Because what sometimes happens is Jerome will come to us, but July won't have prepped us. And Jerome, people embarrassed, ashamed, they're not going to say, they're not going to be so forthcoming with their performance-related issues.
It'll be from my perspective.
Exactly.
And my own bias.
So then we'll go down a whole different path than and that won't support him to keep his job, right? That won't support him. It'll support him with, I'm making up, his depression or his divorce, but it won't support him with how he's performing at work.
Right. And so I wanted to add, a couple of things, right? So for those of you that are listening and just jumping in and chiming in, EAP is a benefit that most employers pay for. It's part of your benefits package. So it behooves you to know what your employer offers you, right? So for example, let's say you're hired for $50,000 and then there's a percentage above your salary that's really your benefits that you don't take home, but the employer is paying for you, right? What I love about EAP, so a little bit of background, EAP was established in the 1960s because of the alcoholism rate going up. And so people losing their jobs left and right. And so the idea was, I want you to stay employed, but I want you to receive services. So back then it was a mandated service. Now it's a voluntary in most instances, which is totally confidential, which is, listen, all I would get as an HR professional is the numbers of the people that are receiving or are accessing EAP. But I don't know if it's Jerome, Merlin, July, or whomever. Right. What I do know is someone is taking advantage because I'm paying for this benefit. As to what you said, Jerome, it could have been too that there might have been some budget cuts that happened in your company. And EAP, unfortunately, even though it's like the best thing to have for employees, it's probably one of the first things to go because it's considered like the cream of the crop kind of benefit, right? And so those are the things that happen as an administrator. What happens with those kind of budgetary restraints? Unfortunately, that's one of the first things to go because it's considered a luxury.
Wow.
Right.
It's a great luxury. I'll tell you that. It has really sustained me in times of different times of need. And the most important thing that we're consistent in saying, it's confidential. They don't know that unless I say to them, this is what I'm dealing with. They don't know the conversations that I'm having with my employee assistance group. But it is, to me, it draws I think when we look at benefits and we talk about benefits, you draw great talent with the strength of your benefits package, and to have an EAP that supports employees and something that they can lean on is definitely a huge part of that. And I'm sorry, Dr. Jackie, I cut you.
No, that's absolutely. And something else that I want to emphasize is that for people who are unionized, look into your union benefits. Oftentimes it's embedded there as well, right? There's services that you can avail yourself that are not necessarily employee assistance program, but are beneficial to you. So this, it would behoove you as an employee to seek out what is it exactly that you offer me? What are my benefits?
Right.
Because that's what
right up front.
right
up front.
Sometimes a lot of people are real quick to say, well, what's my salary? And you know what? You can pay me $10,000 more, but if what you're offering me in benefits is $30,000 more, does the $10,000 really outweigh the $30,000?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially depending upon knowing me and the things that I'm going to need.
Right.
These are the conversations that I have a lot with students. It's like you get to really hone in on what is offered. I was very fortunate. I have experienced burnout due to stress, right? Burnout that scared the daylights out of me. When I tell you that I took the bus, got off the bus, bought coffee, sat on at my desk, and said, "How the heck did I get here?"
Yes.
I was like,
Been there.
Problem.
Been
Right?
there.
Yeah, because
You're on automatic.
Absolutely. And how that played out was that I was able to realize that one of my staff members was experiencing burnout. And it was as if it was, like you said, automatic. But what we did was he was a cornerstone of the company, was with the company for 20 years, moved up the ranks, was a client once, and then moved to managerial position, and got a full pay scholarship to Yeshiva University for a master's degree. I mean, boom, beautiful life that I dream about. Education paid for, good job,
Right.
Everything perfect. But had to maintain a B average, which means a lot.
Yes.
On top of that, you're an African American male in a Jewish institution.
Mm.
Okay. And so he burned out. And it was his staff that came to me and said, I think something is wrong, kind of like what Zulai said. And I was like, what do you mean? No, this person is stellar, right? Because from the appearance, they're coming to work, they're doing the work, they're taking lunch, they're doing all this wonderful stuff. And then when I finally inspected the work, right? Because that's another thing. As managers, we have to inspect the work that's being done. And I looked and it was third-party billing. I said, oh my God. We can't, this is ridiculous. You build for something that usually takes 2 hours, 8 hours.
Oh, wow.
Something is off here. Something is so it's those, checks and balances. And so the beauty of that was that then we became his team. We said, you need to get to EAP. It's not a choice. We need to make sure that you go. HR sat with this individual, made sure they went through EAP, and then the executive director and myself, we sat down and we redesigned his position, right? So that it would be a win situation. So instead of a 5-day, he had a 3-day, right? There were certain things that he was able to work from home. Back then, you didn't hear that. That was like, what? Right? And so it was a 4-day, 3-day coming in, 1 day working from home, and then 1 day off so that he can concentrate on his work. And so we did see an improvement. And of course, he stayed in the company and he left on his own terms after that because he got the MSW, then he moved on. But being a person who suffered the burnout due to stress that could lead to anxiety, and thank God it didn't lead to anything else. It's very scary because oftentimes, like Zulai said, you don't know what you're going through.
And I just want you, because that was going to be my next question. When it's brought to your attention, your process as, the manager, what's your process for you to do? And I'm aware also, especially when we're talking about either mental or physical health issues, that there are laws in place that certain things we just cannot say or share anything. So what was your process, Dr. Jackie? If you could just recap that again, that you did in order to surround this young man so that he can get back to who he needed to be in order to be the type of employee he was.
Well, the first thing was denial. No, I'm fine. Nothing is going on. Nothing is. What do you mean? That's not true. Okay, let me show you some stuff. Right. And so being able to bring back and say, look, you approved this documentation is not documented. It's not documented according to the funder. You billed this amount. You know this is not billable. And so the person was able to look and really see that there was something wrong. And then to say, listen, this is, going down to the disciplinary action. I'm going to have to write you up.
Yeah.
I'm going to, because this is what's going on. Because now I'm getting pressure too from the top, right? Because that's another thing. People do see certain behaviors, right? And so to be able to say, we have a choice here. You can either allow me to help you, right? And if there's nothing there, then there's nothing there.
Right.
I could probably be making all this up. I don't know.
Right.
Like I said earlier, I'm not going to be your clinician. I'm your supervisor before I'm anything else, but I'm a supervisor with compassion.
Yes.
Right. And so, and I'm in social services. So come on. I can't be the warden in the social services field. Like,
right.
Who does that? And so to be able to have that heart-to-heart conversation and say, listen, what's going on? How can I support? And to use supervision. See, that's another thing. When you're in social services, any type of job, supervision is necessary. And I've always had a 3-prong approach to supervision. One is the data. It's something that, we're counting beans. How many assessments have you done? You haven't, right? The other one is how can I support you? And the other one is clinical because we deal with people. So this client is exhibiting these behaviors that can trigger you. How can I support you?
Yeah.
So to be able to come from that place to show performance and say, this is where it's lacking, and I believe this is why, how can I support you? Well, then that opened the venue. And the executive director loved him. It was a poster child, right? And so to be able to say, is it okay? And to get permission. I think it would have been different if he would have said no. Well, then I think it would have been more disciplinary action and then let him then come and share with both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to speak to managers and disciplinary action and kind of encourage the wisdom and the balance between the compassion and also having a firm boundary, because sometimes people are like, say, functional alcoholics, where they don't realize what's happening, right? And they think they're, quote, getting away with it. Mm-hmm. And so I do encourage, to have the conversations, to make them a little bit more formal, to also remind and make note yourself, because managers have a lot of things going on, not just managing staff, right? Mm-hmm. They've got their budgets to make and all kinds of decisions and projects to work on and other goals. So just to even be mindful and see the patterns, because sometimes that helps, that gives the leverage for an employee who is using substances or, starts out as social drinking and it gets a little too much, or even just people that are having trouble sleeping and then they use alcohol to help them sleep and get caught out that way. So I just encourage any managers to be willing to use the formal disciplinary process to help to recognize that too can be supportive, particularly if you're compassionate while you do it, and not mean about it or angry about it.
and you touched on something that I really would like to really touch on. So I believe, as an employee and as someone who was at the top of management, that mental health crisis or even substance abuse in the workplace is handled differently for Black and brown employees than it is for white employees. I would like to hear each of your thoughts on my feelings about that. And I say that because I'm a witness. I'm not only a witness, someone that it happened to, the manner in which someone right next to me is dealing with substance abuse, and me, I'm coming to you and I'm saying I'm struggling here and this is what I'm struggling with. I'm met with disciplinary action where this individual is met with, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to get you to employee assistance. So, and Zulai, I'm going to ask you to start with that. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's like this, what it's bringing to mind is like multiple things, multiple levels of things, right? I think that to one end, from the managerial perspective, I think that so just in general, just from the perspective of being a manager, or at the school level, an administrator, a boss, there's something to be said about the role of the boss in his or her ability to connect with people. I think that's one of the most primary things that you need to do that really makes the difference between a good boss because there's lots of people who are organizational. There are lots of people who are great with numbers, right? They've got a head for it, whatever. That doesn't make them a good boss.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you're really good at leading people. That doesn't mean you're good at inspiring. That doesn't mean you're good at getting the best out of people. Right. And the people who are really good at that are the people who know who are these people who are working for them. Yes. Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean to say that, I need to know that your, husband's name is John and your wife's name is Stacy and your children, little Benny and Michelle. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to know everything about your life, but at least I need to have a sense of who you are as a person. And that needs to be step number one. Because then what you brought up, Jerome, right? How often is that from some extent, right? From the managerial perspective, how often is that the fault of our own inner biases that we ourselves don't know because we don't know ourselves and we don't know where our biases lie, right? And therefore we react in different ways to different people without even understanding that that's what we're doing. Right. But also because we don't know these people. And so we are reacting based on our own, inner beliefs, our own held ideas of where these people might be coming from or what their backgrounds might be that are leading to these different types of behaviors. And so cause me to behave and to react in these different ways that then really just form a completely unfair way of treating my employees and the people who are working under me. So that's one end. And then I think also as you just began talking and talking about that disparity between the ways two people, especially when one of those people is a person of color, what came to my mind also is just, like we've even on this platform, we have spoken in the past about what it means to be a person of color dealing with mental health, what it means culturally, what it means in terms of your background. And even as you were talking, what I thought to myself, like, what it also means just in terms of your vocabulary, of the words in which you have in your lexicon that allow you to speak towards the things that are going on with you, right? And how sometimes, unfortunately, because in our communities, a lot of this is new language. It's language we don't have. We don't know how to necessarily express to a boss, an administrator, a manager, here's the situation in which I'm going through. Here are my rights as your employee. Here is your obligation as my boss. And I would like each of us to meet our expectations. Yes. Right? How often do we just, and I very much say we, right? How often do we just not have that language? We don't even know what that language is, right? Dr. Jackie talking about the importance of knowing your benefits, of not just thinking about, well, what's the bottom line in my paycheck? Like after taxes, how much am I bringing home? Not just knowing that, but knowing all the other things that you're getting, right? These perks. beyond just like, oh, well, how much are you putting towards my retirement, right? Those are all important things, but they're not everything that make up a benefits package. So even just when you are going through this, because you don't always know, because people at this higher echelon, they don't always take the time to make these interpersonal connections so that you can easily express what it is that's going on. I think also, just as employees, it's important that we arm ourselves with the language that's necessary in order for us to be able to explain what exactly is going on when something is going on, when we're finally aware of the thing that's going on, so that we are treated fairly, so that we are treated equally, especially in a place where the other person may not even know, right? That they're not, I think of, and this might seem out of left field, but I think of like that movie Hidden Figures. Do you guys remember when,
She went to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Right. Well, not even, I wasn't even thinking, but yes, the bathroom. Yes. But I was actually thinking of the part where I think it was Kirsten Dunst. She was saying, I'm not racist.
When they were in the bathroom washing their hands.
I'm for you people. Yes. And she says, yes, I think that you really believe that.
You really believe that.
I believe that. I believe that you really believe that, right?
You, not me, but you.
Right. You believe it. I don't believe it. But I believe that you believe it, right? And so to that extent, I'm not going to be like, no, lady, you're wrong.
Right.
I think you really think that.
Right.
And so, right, sometimes we don't even recognize where our biases lie. And if we are not armed with our rights and what we are entitled to as employees, then that unequalness happens and we don't have the words and the ways to fight it. But then I think, again, as managers, bosses, like, I think the number one way in which you can at least make an attempt not to be that person is to know who is working for you. You have to pay attention. You have to pay attention beyond just, Merla always gets her spreadsheets in on time. That's why she's my favorite, right? That's important to know, because of course, if suddenly Merla starts turning in her spreadsheets late, you're like, wait a minute, Merla, you always turn your spreadsheets on. What's happening? Right. But then also just knowing that, like, Jackie is the person who always says good morning, and Jackie's been coming in for the past month and people aren't hearing from her. She's withdrawing more and more. You got to know Jackie to know that that's happening to her. And then you've got to know Jackie in order to recognize something is going on. And this is just beyond run of the mill, you're looking to get fired, kind of thing. And I think that's the way in which you can then fight against being one of these people who unfairly treats people because you're not aware of your personal biases against others.
Thank you. Wow, that was powerful. Yeah,
I just wanted to add, it's important also as a manager, I don't know who I was sharing this. I think it was actually in the prayer line. Hierarchy of command came from a military point of view. That's where it came from. Hence, organizational charts. When you look, we're not trying to break all of that, even to the point of where does the manager sit when they come into the conference room? No longer sit at either end, sit in the middle, be part of it. Right. Well, I've always felt that it's important for me to walk the floor. My job is not behind my desk. If I'm going to provide a safe environment for my staff, is I need to know what's going on that floor. I need to be able to stop and say, hey, how you doing? What do you do? Any support? Well, how can I help you?
They should not only see you when something has gone wrong.
Exactly. And
too many managers do.
And I should not have to wait for supervision on Friday between 2 and 3 to find out that you're having problems Monday between 10 and 11. Right? Like, you shouldn't have to wait this whole time.
Be visible.
Right? Another thing is, as a manager, be mindful you can get sued.
Yes.
Right? You can get sued. The company does not have to get sued, but trust and believe you can get sued.
Yes.
Right? And so you would want to be known as a fair person. That's why it's important to have, listen, you have the same tool and the same rubric and you weigh everyone the same, right? In a way that is objective. When I said before, there's 3 data points for me: is the quality improvement, is the counting the beans, and is the clinical how I can help you. And trust and believe that everything you say is documented. The supervisor that tells you that nothing is documented is lying to you. Because trust and believe that even if it's in a notebook,
Yes.
something is being written.
Yes. Yes.
Right? As a person of case management, always time, who was the conversation, bullet points, what was said. Time, who was the conversation, bullet. Not only that, but I was also a billable person. So I needed to account for my time. So to be able to really look at someone and to be able to identify what's going on. If when I did my walks, 5 out of, I don't know, 15 times the person wasn't at the desk. Well, what's up? Is it something that you need that you're not getting? Not from a point of, oh, you're getting up 5 times out of the 15.
Not snooping.
No, it's right. Is this something that you need that I can support you with? Right. And let me tell you, I had, there was this one particular company that I worked for, and they ordered, those stress balls.
Yes.
Well, it was a misfit. They put the wrong whatever. And so I had a box, and I started, right, like literally taking the balls and dropping it over a partition. And the staff member would look at it. I was like, okay. And then, they would throw it up. And then at the end, what we started doing at 4:45, we just started playing with these balls back and forth, right? And then as I'm getting up and I'm throwing a ball, here comes the chief executive officer, and I threw it, and I went, oh, I'm fired. And he said, you know what? I've heard that this was going on, but I also realized that this is how you release stress.
Yeah.
And that's how you send them home.
Right.
And can you believe this individual would come to my department at 4:45 every day to play with those damn balls? Listen, don't go out there and throw balls. I mean,
so I like to get to know my employees, right, by occasionally doing coffee with them, right, and just sitting down. We're not talking about work. Hey, how are you? How's your family? How's everything going? And hoping that they're going to be vulnerable with me, and if not, trusting that because I'm good at reading people as well, right? And I could tell if someone is holding back, but just telling them this is a safe space. We're just having a conversation away from work. How are you doing? How are you doing with work? How are things at home? All of that. So that, I try to remove them from that thing. So if they are with a client, I'll inbox them. Hey, when you're done, can we go downstairs? Come by my office so we can go downstairs and get something to drink. You're not in trouble or anything, because usually as a manager, when you do that, they're like, okay, I'm on edge. No, I just want to have a coffee with you. We'll just go downstairs. Or every now and then, like I would treat a couple of employees, let's go down to lunch together and treat, and I would circulate that. So it was me investing in them and them getting also to know me, because I'm sharing with them as well as they're sharing with me.
Absolutely. I've had situations where I've had fundraisers with staff. We found out that we all like bowling. We started a league. We would go after work on Fridays, to the point that we would, let's do like a, pledge per pin. And we did a fundraiser for the organization. We took a Friday afternoon. The executive director had buy-in. We put in our own lunch hour. They gave us an hour, and we raised $6,000 for the organization, right? Another time it was yoga. It was, community yoga. Come on, again, an hour from the company, our lunch hour, we did yoga and we came back, right? So it's also the responsibility of, I would say, that manager to see creative ways in which they can support their staff, right? In a way that you have healthy boundaries, right? Because you always have to be mindful that you need the healthy boundaries as well.
Yeah. team building. I would work that into my budget every year. So yes.
Yeah.
Merla, same for you. The question around, how mental health challenges are handled amongst people of color in the workplace and amongst those who don't look like us.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, the first thing that comes to mind is every skin folk isn't kinfolk. So you don't have to, people of color can jack up other people of color,
Yes.
vice versa.
Yes.
And we're all swimming in the white supremacy delusion pool collectively, no matter what our race. And so that's the culture that prevails. Racism is unfortunately still alive and well, even as we try to dismantle it and undo it, and exercise anti-racist practices. I think statistics will bear out what you're saying, unfortunately, in terms of all kinds of, general incarceration rates and, in the school system, and, Black children aren't seen as children and Black people aren't seen as people, as humans. So all of that comes into play, the bias that Zulay was talking about. I just encourage basic awareness and self-awareness. And we all have blind spots and implicit bias. So where are you getting your feedback? Who are you open to getting feedback from? In terms of people of color who find themselves, in substance abuse situations, sometimes, unfortunately, it's about trust. Like, do you trust enough to ask for help? Right. Do you trust the institution? And it is a risk. I can't say that just because you ask for help, you're going to get it and you're not going to be penalized. Right. And I can't say that if you don't ask for help and you're drowning, that, that's going to put you in a better stead either. Right. So, it's a case-by-case basis. And I would encourage anyone to try to get out in front of it. Yeah. Certainly, if you have health insurance and you can access behavioral health, and even as you access behavioral health, not all clinicians are I'm not a great clinician for everybody. So if, God forbid, you meet with me and, we just don't have a good fit, you don't feel I can help you, it's no problem. Go, work with somebody else that you feel will help you. But seek out the help and find the help and try to do it before you get sicker, right? Because it can be intimidating looking for a mental health provider. Who do I go to? It's a whole list of names. Do I go to someone white? Do I go to someone of color? Do I see a psychiatrist, a family therapist? There's all kinds of, so it can be overwhelming, particularly if you're not feeling well, if you're feeling depressed or you're feeling anxious. So I just encourage to get started, and sometimes it's helpful to act as if many, many people are inclined to help others. So act as if you're helping someone else. So if you would do it for your baby sister, then act like you're doing it for your baby sister. Whatever you can do to detach it and just make it about the business of finding a mental health provider for yourself, then just do it. And I encourage, just focus on what it would feel like to feel better again.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. And we're coming to the end of this conversation. Our Dr. Jackie is a lot. We keep saying it. An hour goes really fast, right? So, I would like each of you around this particular subject, and I'll start with you, Dr. Jackie. Please share any last-minute comments that you would share with our audience, those who are watching. And if you're watching on replay, we ask that you do #replay. Tell us where you're watching from. Share with us what last advice you would give to anyone who is dealing with mental health struggles in the workplace. May it be them, may it be a colleague, may it be a student, whoever it may be, what last words would you share?
So I want to, I agree with what Marilla said. It's really like be aware, right? Don't wait until someone tells you if you can. And the way you can do that is simply know what your benefits are, right? If you are a employee, if you are an employer, educate your staff on the benefits they have, right? And listen, make an appointment with HR. Go see and check everything. See what you can avail yourself with. You may or may not, right? You also, if you're privy to it, when you look at your budget, look to see what percentage is to benefits, so you can see what the company's offering you on top of it, right? What I would say for college students is most colleges do have a counseling department. Avail yourself. They're usually embedded with student services or with the advisors. I have students who I have noticed change in behavior, and I tell them, do you want me to walk with you there? Now, I don't have to do that,
Right.
but I do, right? Because these are students who, for the most part, I teach adults who are not straight out of high school, who don't even know that these services exist, who are going to, coming to school after a full day of work, and then they're stressed out. Single parents trying to make ends meet, trying to get the piece of paper so they can get a couple of $1,000s more. And so to be able to educate them and tell them, look, this is here for you. Take advantage of it, right? So wherever you go, see what benefits are there for you and see what your insurance covers. We're speaking about mental health, but a lot of insurances cover acupuncture, right? And so a lot of people don't realize that. So what are preventive means that you can start utilizing now to support so that it doesn't develop in the future?
Thank you, Dr. Jackie Zalai. Any last words?
Yeah, I think definitely, I definitely do want to echo what Dr. Jackie says. I think that not only as an employee do you want to know what you can avail yourself of, but as an employer, you want to know what your employees can avail themselves of. I think that's a big thing. Like I said before, I cannot overstate the importance of knowing who's working for you. And knowing who you're working for, right? Knowing how you can approach that person. That's also very, very important. And I think that really one of the really important things in terms of just being able to support those people who work for you is just, really being aware of everyone who got hired for a reason. There was something that those people were bringing, right, when they were put there. And so if you were the person who hired them, be cognizant of what made you pick that person. And if that is still there, right, if something is shifting that. If you were not the person who hired that person, then be cognizant of the fact that you are lacking that knowledge when you first get into that role. So find it. Go find that information. Again, get to know the people who are working for you. That is extremely important because you won't know if something is going wrong if you do not know who those people are. And I think if I were just going to give someone just advice in general, not even just people who are like in this role and in terms of what's out there, is just, I think also it's very important. There are some of us that we work our jobs for the sake of the paycheck, right? It's not something we love to do. It's not something we're doing out of the passion of our heart.
Right.
It's something we're doing because we need to survive. Maybe we have children. Maybe we have rent to pay. Maybe we have, bills to pay. But I think that there is something to be said about not simply showing up every day, about building relationships, getting to know people, getting to know, even if it's just one other person, because again, there's something we like to say when in education, especially often, right, that the answer is in the room, right? So you give kids a project to do, where they don't know how to figure it out. And you're like, you got to ask each other because the answer is here. You just haven't figured it out. Somebody has it. Somebody has an idea. You just got to find out what it is. And I think that sometimes that's an issue too, when we isolate ourselves in our places of business and in our places of work, and then we come across these crises, there is no one to turn to. Because we don't know anyone. We don't know who to turn to, right? Like asking Merla what an EAP is. If I'm not comfortable, look at all the wealth of knowledge that someone like Merla would have. And if I'm not comfortable, maybe asking Jerome, who knows Merla, who might be able to be like, well, I don't know the answer, but I know this person who works downstairs. She actually has all this information for you.
Right.
There are so many, it's so often that it's honestly just a matter of communication. That's the first step towards dealing with a crisis is being able to communicate with the right person, to start us on that road to recovery or help or whatever it is that we need. So even if you're doing a job just for the sake of it, and even if you don't like what you're doing, the fact that you are with someone else in a room means there's a human element to it. And so take the time to get to know who's next to you.
Yes, thank you. Merla.
So, yeah, thank you. So I'm going to dovetail off of what was said and celebrate and highlight Wellness Wednesday. And one of the things that, the pandemic was kind of good for, one could argue, is normalizing mental health issues and going through such trauma as a collective.
Yes.
The vernacular of anxiety and isolation and grief and fear, and just to be able to talk about that and normalize that. So just kind of encourage everyone who has used mental health facilities. Certainly, I really appreciate your candor, Jerome, on this meeting, on this workshop, but just to be open to mental health and supporting people and not letting it be so scary and frightful, and encouraging health. What do we need for our mental health, and to maybe focus on what is it like to have joy at work, and how does one prevent burnout, and how does one recapture? Zulay, you just talked about why did you hire that person, and I'll echo that and say, and why did you take the job? So it's like, where's the joy? Where,
Find that joy.
Right, and to be mindful of yourself in terms of the self-awareness at work, interacting with your colleagues. When are you getting annoyed? When are you shutting down? What does burnout look like for you? What does depression look like for you? What are the signs, and how do you counteract it? In terms of exercise, and what are you eating, and how are you resting? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you having enough fun? What are you looking forward to? What's getting you excited? So all of those things help to keep our mental health and spiritual. Not only knows that praying, what is your spiritual practice? Fasting, praying, reading the Bible, finding your people, and enjoying life with your people.
Yes.
Praise God.
I'm gonna plug in real quick. Marla just did a workshop on finding joy in the workplace, which is something, Jerome, that I like. I also looked someplace else. They're offering courses in finding happiness in the workplace, and I was like, wait a minute. Remember, we come from that militant, top down, like that. There's no room for any of that. But like Marla said, now there is. And so if ever you want to discuss that,
Yes.
I'm volunteering. Oops.
So I'm gonna say, and I know if any of my coworkers are watching this, they will tell you I am the joy in their workday.
Oh, nice.
I kid you not. I mean, I when I walk through the door, yes, I know it's work, but no one said that we cannot have fun at work.
Right.
And what I used to do, and it was so hilarious because my former colleagues, I'll never forget, I had gotten sick with blood clots on my lung, and I was out of work for like 6 months. And they would text me, Jerome, our lunch table is not the same without you there. So when I come back, everybody, like different people would come on different days. Everybody, we had to get a table for 20 people to sit at a table because now I was back. I'm intentional that no matter where I walk into a room, I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make people smile, and we're going to have a good time no matter what. Maybe work, play, or otherwise. It is a requirement for my peace, and I'm going to bring love and joy to those who are around me. So I'm up for that, Zalai and Dr. Jack. I'm up for it. I'm down for whatever, anything that's going to be fun. Let's do it. But I just want to wrap up by saying also Buy Black for Life. I'm extremely concerned at what's happening in our communities. I saw the video from the young man who was being shot at and happened to, in running away, knocked over 2 kids, and the gunman continued to try to shoot and traumatize 2 children for probably the rest of their lives. Me as a man and as a Black man, it is time that I call on my brothers for us to get out and let's address what's going on with our young people. Let's wrap our arms around them. Let's meet them where they are so that we can start healing our communities, because I know it's not just I want to shoot somebody. There are some underlying things that are going on with our young people that we need to address. And I will spend every day until God calls me home to heal our young people. And that is my goal. So I hope that more men will join me. I will accept all who will join me. I would like churches to open your doors so that we can have these conversations with our young people, and now we can start healing our communities, because healing for our communities comes from within, not from outside. So thank you all.
Jerome,
I'm sorry.
just to piggyback on what you say, if anyone hearing this is an educator, just remember that every child has a story. And you may think you know that kid's story because you get to read the address they live at and the phone number they have, and you see the clothes that they wear, and you think, oh, I know the story, because you hear the way that they talk. You don't know the story. Until you're told the story, you don't know the story. Every kid has a story, and you do not know what these kids are walking into your house, in your school, and your room, having seen, having lived with, having or having not eaten. You don't know any of what's happening before they walk into that room.
Yes. So I'm intentional about it. I'm having meetings with my brothers that we are going to get some messages out there. There are some organizations that work with gang violence, that work with gun violence, that we are putting some things together, not so we could talk about it, but that we could be out there and be about it, to have our young people put their weapons down, let's talk about what's going on. Let's talk about what you're feeling. How can I help get you in school? How can I help get you a job? What is it? Because when you have a job, you're too busy to bang, period, right? You are too busy to bang because you are working. So what is it that we can do as men so that we can wrap our arms around our community? So that is my intention and my passion, and I'm going to do it. So thank you all. I thank you for being a part of this conversation. I look forward to much more that we will have together, different topics, but this was an amazing topic. I hope one and all takes these gems and puts them to very good use. So all Buy Black for Life.
Thank you. Buy Black for Life. Bye, everybody.
Have a great night.